All right, all right. Good morning, all. Good afternoon, all, wherever you are. We're a few minutes away from starting, but we noticed there are a few people in the waiting room, so we wanted to hop online and say hello. Nothing to do yet. John and I are getting ready to share a fun presentation with you. Some framing for this presentation today as well. We do have two other teammates who are not on video with us, but who are watching chat. So if and when you have questions throughout the presentation, you will be able to ask us, and our team will either try to answer them or we might answer them live. We're kind of obviously going to change a little bit around you, but for the next minute, I'm just going to go on mute for a second. Make sure that actually team who's offline, John and Jen, are you able to hear us okay? Could you text or message me? Excellent. People can hear great. We hope that means everyone can hear well. And John, I think, so we'll wait till probably 10:02, 10:03 our time before we officially kick off. Let me do one thing, which is to let in, 1 second.
How you guys all doing? It's great to see people from everywhere. Some of you guys must be up real late at night. Wow, it's great to see how many people are from all over the world. I hope the weather is nice for you guys as it is where I am in Spokane, Washington.
What are you experiencing, John?
There's people from all over the world. If people like this, we might have to do one at like 7:30 in the morning so that they don't have to be up at like midnight.
That's definitely true. That's definitely true. Yeah, it's fun to see. We got
Portland. That's great. Pacific Northwest. I hope the weather's nice there too. Oh, sorry, Sasha.
And John, can you hear me all right too?
Yep, I can.
Sweet. Portugal. Oh, this is so awesome. Wow. Okay. We'll do 2 more minutes. John, why don't we got 2 minutes? Why don't you tell a little story, John? I know we're going to do a full introduction, but for the folks who are here a little bit early, let's give them a little special treat. Tell me, how did you get into revenue management?
Yeah, I got a good story for this, I think. So I got into revenue management. I came from nonprofit when I was out of school, and I did that for a long time. And my buddies recruited me to come work for this like goofy garage company that they were working at. They were like, oh, it's great. It's like super chill and you can drink beer in the office whenever you want. It's called Stay Alfred. There's like 6 people and we'll hang out, okay? So I was like, great, sounds awesome. You know, so I got hired to do, you know, reservations back then. Pretty much like 80 to 90% of our reservations were coming through HomeAway inquiries, and everything was closed on the phone. So as we grew, I was, you know, put in charge of the reservation team pretty early, and I was doing a lot of work to analyze our reservation information, our revenue information, and eventually they put me in charge of the revenue management department as we grew and decided that was a department we needed. And early on, like we didn't have a lot of tools. So to give you guys an idea, like,
well, we might talk a little bit about that in a minute.
Okay.
But we've got we're probably just at about time where we should do the official kickoff. We still got people coming in.
How's it going, everyone?
Yeah, we not to interrupt a great story, John, but yeah, we'll kick off here in about 30 seconds because I know how much you have to share today. I think there's a lot of fun things. I want to make sure that folks get to it. So we'll give we'll give 30 more seconds here, and then John, I'm gonna do a quick intro of a few things that I'm impressed by with you outside of what you just shared, and then we're live, dude. Then we're live. So
you're gonna make me blush at the beginning of a presentation.
All right. As soon as my clock ticks over to 10:04, as soon as John's clock ticks over to 10:04, we're live. Great. Okay, everyone, welcome. We've got people truly coming in from all over the world. This is so cool to see. To be honest, John and I have been talking about revenue management for about 3 or 4 months and kind of designing some educational materials. We decided that we wanted to put together kind of an experimental presentation for you all. Actually, the content is epic. I've seen some of it already, but really the goal today started as a small experiment, and now we literally have hundreds of people who are tuning in to check out what I think is one of the best in the game at deriving revenue from short-term rentals. For a little bit of background about John Desrelais. So John and I have worked in the same category for 7 years. For the folks who were here from the start today, you heard that John was early at Stay Alfred. I was the founder of Lyric. Our companies actually competed for many years. We looked at each other's revenue management strategies. So we've gone back and forth on revenue management strategies longer than we know, but we really started talking as friends about 3 or 4 months ago. John is a power user of Wheelhouse. He has taught me new things about our platform, just as I think he will teach you new things today as well. He is creative in his approach to revenue management. He's excellent at execution. I've been extremely, extremely impressed. John's background, John, you were the head of revenue management at Stay Alfred, you mentioned that?
Yep, I was the head of revenue management at Stay Alfred.
Great. And in your spare time, it sounds like you do a little painting. Is that true as well?
Yeah, I'm actually, my education is in studio art, so I'm a pretty classical oil painter, and I've continued to do that over the last decade, show and stuff like that. So if you meet me at a conference, I'll usually tell you, and I'll usually give you that card instead of my business card.
Yes, and the summation is that John is an artist and a scientist around this stuff, right? I think what you'll see today is John has taken what sometimes has been known as the art of revenue management and really turned it into a science. So today we have a few slides. We're going to walk you through about 3 slides, some high-level framing for John around best practices. We're then going to dive into the tool, which is Wheelhouse, where John will show you a little bit of his best kind of how he does revenue management in action. So we're actually going to do a live demo. You'll be able to come out of today with tools. And the platform, for those who don't know, who aren't Wheelhouse customers today, Wheelhouse is, yes, it's a revenue management platform. Historically, we've been quite good at dynamic pricing, and what we've added recently are detailed market reports, and we have a comp set tool coming live as well. So it's a much broader tool, and John is going to walk us through 2 of those sections at least today. John, without further ado, let's kick off, bud. You ready to go?
Yeah. Well,
right.
Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. I think my screen's up so you can all see it. And just for your information, sometimes I get a little excited. So if I'm moving too fast, just put something in the chat. Let us know. Andrew will interrupt me and tell me.
I'll call you out too, but yeah.
So the first thing we kind of wanted to cover today is just some of the principles around what we're talking about. They really feed into the revenue management philosophy and approach that I like to take, and I think they're pretty helpful for you all and will help kind of ground this live drive that we do today. The first thing that I kind of want to talk about is double checking your assumptions. And now we didn't put it in there, but it means have some assumptions. In order to make actions and do things, you have to have an idea of what you're trying to do in the market. And then the best thing you can do from a revenue manager's perspective is to be able to operate off of those, but also to challenge them and ask yourself, is what I think going on really going on? So we'll show you a little bit today how we can use some of the market data in the platform to build some assumptions and also to check those assumptions and how that will interface with making actions on your portfolio. The second thing we want to talk about is practice turning data into patterns. What this means is, humans have a really canny ability to recognize shapes. And so if you have assumptions about what those shapes mean, and those are flexible, you're going to be able to process what is otherwise an unreadable sea of data into things that indicate actions for you. The last piece is build around your mix of risk and reward. And what that means is in revenue management, what makes it both an art and a science is we have an idea of how pricing and demand works, but we don't know exactly what's going on anytime. So really everything we're doing is about risk management in terms of where we are in the market. And if you know what your strategy is and where you're trying to position yourself, you have an idea of what kind of risks you're taking and what actions you can take if it's not producing the outcome that you're looking for. So I'll pause there for a second. Andrew, did you want to interject anything, or are we good to jump right in?
No, so just for those listening, those principles that John introduced there, which really are challenging your assumptions, practicing enough to turn data into patterns, and then really thinking about your risk profile. What you'll see John doing next is driving through Wheelhouse and kind of weaving that narrative throughout the tool, right? I have a little sneak peek, of course, of what John's going to present, but keep those 3 principles in mind. We will be coming back to those, and we'll see how you can kind of bring those to life around software. So that's it, just a summation. John, keep going. Love it.
All right, so I'm going to hop over here to the Wheelhouse platform. Right now I'm on the dashboard page. We have a little bit of an account for you guys to do this live drive. It's based in Nash Vegas, kind of downtown. So that'll be pretty good. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go up here at the top of the screen and go to the market intel. I want to look at some of the market reports because I have some assumptions about how the Nashville market's going to work. With Stay Alfred, I worked there for a long time, so I developed experience in the market. And it being the beginning of March, the assumptions I'm kind of holding coming into this are traditionally we're moving into a pretty high season. In this kind of urban situation, we're going to be see pretty high rates. And in my past experience, there's a pretty big difference between the weekday and the weekend. Additionally, we know that COVID is going on, so I might have some assumptions around that. My assumptions from the last 6 months might be booking windows are super short. Everything's booking at the last minute, and I'm not sure how the rates are matching up historically. So what I want to do first is just kind of check some of these. Let me backtrack real quick before we go to the market intel reports. I'm just going to go to a listing. And the first thing I think we should do is just take a look at the base rate plan that's being developed by the system. Because when you look at this base rate plan, it's going to give you a lot of insights just into the market at a glance. So we can look at this, and this is what the system is drawing out for us, is the rates. And what we can see here, if we're positioned over here, is that the rates are kind of lower in the short term, but this is a pretty stable, like high area from here to here. You can see like that overall curve goes up, and then it kind of drops back down at the end of the year. We can also see that the movement of the line is pretty jagged. And what we're looking at there is probably, we'll check that when we get a little closer, but this is kind of affirming my assumption of a big difference between weekday and weekend performance. We're seeing big spikes on what I think are the weekends, and they drop pretty low on the weekdays. So that's going to inform our pricing situation. We probably don't want to just have a flat rate all week unless we're going for a certain kind of length of stay customer. But that already, just glancing at this is.
And John, if I could interject. So for those folks who are newer to the platform, from your dashboard, if you linked an account to us, you would see all your listings there. John has clicked into one specific listing. And the first view you would see is the calendar. But what John really quickly went to, and something to pay attention to, is John really wants to go to his settings first. And he wants to make sure his base rate, which is the foundation of your pricing strategy, I think it's fair to say, right, is accurate and will create the kind of the pricing strategy that you assume might be best. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it kind of ties into that turning data into patterns. I can look at this, and if you're not quite as quick as I am, it comes over time, and you'll get there where you can look at this and you can just see the seasonality. This is curving up like this. There's this jagged pattern. And now I am affirming some of my assumptions or making assumptions about the market that I'm going to think about when I dive deeper into market data. So I like the visualization here at this first level. You can also, if you have a lot of experience in the market, there's a lot of options for you to tweak this rate plan through the system. And if you have an idea of how your specific product is performing, you can kind of match what this is doing and decide how you might adjust that by looking at those patterns in the data.
John, let's actually do that. Let's say that you thought that a particular month in Nashville, in your experience, was stronger than what you were seeing in Wheelhouse. How would you think about that?
Right. So if I know that like I have, groups of people who come maybe for movie production or music production, and they often stay with us, and maybe in the month of May, let's say, I can go to this seasonality adjustment, and I can set the system to set that rate a little higher using this slider here.
Sweet.
I can do that for any of the months. I can also do it for the weekend, weekday. And there's a couple other options in the base rate that kind of like align with your strategy in terms of how you want to set that base rate. And then as you'll see when we get towards the end of this, you have the ability to change a lot of individual days rates on individual units pretty quickly. So the next thing I want to do is we've affirmed some of our assumptions about just how the market is performing. I want to go into this market data and just kind of see if I can find out what's going on in the marketplace. So I'm going to go up here to Market Intel. I got Nashville already selected, but you can click See All Markets. And I'll click on Nashville. So in Nashville, this pulls up a really cool kind of overview. I'm going to walk you through a few specific data points that I think are pretty interesting in terms of what we're doing here for making decisions about rate intervention. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to look at lead time. So I'm going to click over here on the trends. This is going to give me kind of like a monthly year over year. And I'm going to click over here on lead time. And the first thing I'm going to note, which probably aligns with my assumption about high season, which is people tend to book a little further out, a little higher rate. You want to have more on the books as you get into what I would call the short window, whether that's 7 days, 14, 30 days for you. It kind of depends on your product. But you can see here that year over year, our lead time in the first couple months of the year has been pretty stable, which is interesting, right? Because we would think with COVID, everything's real short, rates are a lot lower, that kind of thing. So this specific data point is maybe indicating that people are still looking further out and purchasing this product. March is much further, but we haven't gone into the short window in March, so it'll come down.
Right.
Another way that we can look at this is if we look at the lead time distribution, which I think is a really good one to look at. So what I did is I went to the historical tab. I went down to this distribution section and hit lead time. You can see that you can look at this for a number of different metrics. And basically what I'm getting here is a little bit more granular breakdown of when people are booking. So if I go over here, these bars are the percentage of the inventory that's being booked in the market within these booking window buckets. And, in my opinion, less than 15 days is like really short. And we're looking at like 34%. And less than 25 days is still pretty short within 30 on an urban market. And that's like half the bookings. So not only is there quite a bit of booking going on in the short term, but there is quite a bit of booking going on further out. I mean, you look at this like 30 to 60 day window, and these are pretty big chunks. So that's an interesting thing here because our average lead time is still pretty long, but there is a very large chunk of bookings going on in the short term.
And John, so you're looking at February here. I mean, how different is this from your experience of Nashville before? I mean, we have a lot of folks whose market has changed so much. Like, any thoughts or general guidance for people in other markets, how they should think about their lead time?
Well, I think you bring up a good point in February, because there's a seasonality change generally in Nashville between February and March. It traditionally started at the end of February. So you don't want to necessarily take these numbers and just like put them into a formula and decide what you're going to do next week or a month from now. We're just trying to get a hunch. And that's why I'm looking at the last month, because I'm looking at the most recent trend to see and comparing that to, as a revenue manager, what I should be pretty aware of on a consistent basis is where I'm making bookings, today, what bookings I made yesterday, what bookings I made last week. And so if I look at the last month, I can extrapolate this forward a little bit. If you look at the seasonality in Nashville is pretty stable for most of the year on that base rate plan. I may make an assumption or maybe a hypothesis that I might be able to extrapolate some of what I'm learning now further out. And that'll become important because really what I'm identifying here is I think that there's some opportunity to book more people out in this, 25 to 60 day window. There's already a lot of people looking. There's a lot of bookings going on here. And I'll show you why. Because the next thing I'm going to look at.
And John, One quick interrupt. We had a good question come in. Just people has asked about lead time, and I appreciate that we already have people who have jumped in and helped out. But lead time is how far from a stay date does someone book, right? So if today, which is what are we on, March 4th, whatever it is, March 5th. If they were to book now in April 5th, April 4th, that would be a 30-day lead time, right? Or 31-day lead time. So lead time is the number of days before a stay date that a guest books. So when John's saying, oh, there's a lot of bookings happening in the last 25 days, that means that in this case, in Nashville, we're seeing that 50% of all bookings are occurring in the last 25 days. And that's a really important thing for folks to understand uniquely for your market or for your inventory type. Kind of how to think about revenue strategy. So John is walking us through how he's looking at Nashville's lead time right now to start informing a strategy around a larger portfolio.
Yeah, you may hear me refer to it. I'll try to refer to it mostly as lead time, but I may also refer to it as DBA, which stands for days before arrival. That would be traditionally what the hotels will refer to it as. But it's they're kind of all the same thing. Lead time, booking window, days before arrival are all dealing with the same concept, which is how far in advance is a customer purchasing your product? And what that relates to is, we all know about like the demand versus time curve or the demand versus price curve. Is on any given day, you aren't totally sure how many people are willing to buy at your price point, but you know that there are people who are probably willing to buy. So we've looked at this lead time thing. Now, the next thing I want to correlate this to is occupancy, because we're seeing that lead time is stable. People are still purchasing in advance. That kind of counters the assumptions I've had about COVID. And so we're just going to look at the occupancy one. So I'm going to go back to trends. I like the trend one because it shows year over year. I know that our year over year stuff is going to be a little bit more difficult, but it is a good baseline for us to at least make comparisons. And so when I go to occupancy here, this is what I'm seeing: a lower occupancy. Pretty much consistently since COVID started, and in the January and February where our lead time was in advance, the occupancy is still pretty low. So those are two data points that kind of counteract each other. You have lead time, which means people are booking in advance, but we're not making as many bookings overall in the marketplace. And we might know we also have less inventory because there's a lot less product in the market. So that's a pretty big counterpoint to what we're doing. So the question is, why would that be occurring, and how does that influence what I'm doing in the market? From my experience, my hunch is we looked at that rate plan and we saw that in the very short term, let me see if I can pull it up real quick so I can just show you. This rate plan is dropping the rates in what otherwise would have been a high season historically, maybe 30 days out, and then it's kind of stabilizing back up to here. And my hunch might be, these are $200 rates. They're still pretty high. I think that maybe people are holding the rate a little too high because we're not sure how the markets are recovering. We know southern markets like Nashville are recovering much better than northern markets, or well, we might know that, whether if you're there reading stuff. But we may still be pricing a little high for the consumers and the insecurity, and that indicates to us an opportunity. Is if we want to book people further out, we might be able to offer pricing that can capture people in a part of our portfolio that will help stabilize our occupancy. And in a situation where we're not sold out consistently, occupancy is going to be the largest contributor to RevPAR, much more so than ADR. Once you've sold out, ADR is the big one. But so I've got two other reports that I want to look at that I think are really good to correlate on a consistent basis for just a little bit. You're going to look a little bit backwards and a little bit forwards. And the two are on this report, we have under the historical section here, nightly rate. So what that means is it's essentially the ADR that people have been booking at. And I'm looking in the past. So I have this set up from November 2020 to March 1st. Our trend on seasonality is about the same. We've got weekends that are high and weekdays that are low. And you can see here that there's a pretty big range. I have, like, at the top end, really high rates. That's what this kind of like color field is it's showing the range, whereas the line is the median. So there's a pretty big difference between the high rate and the low rate, which means people are keeping their, like, their rates pretty high or they've sold high rates. But the median is lower here at 149. If we recall from what we were looking at in our rate situation, the rack rate we're posting was closer to $200. So there's a pretty big difference there in terms of what's actualizing on the calendar versus what people are putting out there, maybe a little further out. And if I look forward, I can see that supported in this data here. So if I go to the future tab on the market reports and go to asking rate, this is going to give you data on what rates people are posting for future dates. And you can see here, you know, if I looked at, this is the last weekend, median of 149 actualized. This is the next weekend, median of 225. That's a pretty big disparity, right? So what that's indicating to me is that two things that relate to my assumption. One, people are looking and purchasing further out, but everyone's at a high price point. So we're capturing that part of the market, but there's probably a bunch more people who are willing to pay a little bit less and come stay. Two, we're not necessarily adjusting to that level of the market quickly enough, and people are just not coming to the market. You know, occupancy is down overall, and it may be down more because we're keeping the rates is a market too high. So what that means for us in our portfolio is if we can take some units and price them differently, we may be able to capture different segments of the demand in the marketplace at different times, which will then inform our decisions closer in. So
we do a few things because I think you're about to go back to the strategy. Is that correct? And doing some rate adjustments, or
I was going to hop into the Pro Tools.
Okay, yeah. So let's get there in 1 second. I think a few things that I was a little bit remiss to mention earlier. One, these market reports that John is walking through, which again, there's the overview, there's the trends section, which kind of is a high level view of what's happening. And then the historical section and the future section are really deep dives into specific cuts of data that I think, I usually think of the overview and trends section as very good beginner places, and the historical and future as very good expert tools to inform a strategy as you become more familiar with this stuff. But these market reports are available in every market that Wheelhouse is in. We're in 60 countries now, we're on 6 continents. We're in 2,000 plus markets, probably 20 to 30,000 cities. Someone had asked about Cornwall. I'm pretty sure we're in Cornwall. So we're a lot of places, and we're about to add many, many more markets as well. So these market reports are free right now. They'll be free for at least another 3 months, potentially longer. So if anyone wants to come learn how their market is performing and how the rebound might occur post-COVID, there are some pretty cool tools here, and John is showing us kind of what he's looking at to inform strategy even during COVID times. So back to you, John. I know you're now taking the learnings from your market report, and it sounds like you're about to go make some adjustments to your strategy.
Yeah, we're gonna jump into the Pro Tools. Before I do that, I think these market reports are pretty solid. You'll see me really focus on the deep dive because I'm coming from the perspective of I'm your revenue manager. I need to make rates on a specific day. And so I need to have really granular detail, but they offer a really wide range. You know, this overview is like, the way I would think about it is if you're an entrepreneur or a CEO, you probably want higher level information that's going to give you much bigger snapshots of the trends. If you're a revenue manager, you want to know what's going on day by day. And you're able to access both in this situation. So moving forward, we've looked at some data and related it to our assumptions or our market strategy here. And what I have developed out of that is a couple ideas when I'm going to go look at the actual rates and bookings that are on the calendar. One is I'm not sure that we're capturing as much in the short term because the rates seem to be degrading much faster than we might be having them degrade. Two, I think that there's opportunities for us to book further out if we cleverly position parts of our portfolio. And that's going to be the assumptions I carry with me into my daily revenue management practice. For you guys, it's really important to be able to make those assumptions and relate them to whatever your strategy is. I think it's important to be able to articulate a strategy, whether that's, hey, I want to book in the top 5% of the ADRs, or I want to be sold out, you know, in the top 5% of the market. That informs the actions you're going to take. And if you haven't been able to articulate your strategy kind of at a market level, work on that. It can start with just a simple sentence. And if you get more complex, that's great. Well, my strategy for Nashville on this sample portfolio we have is I want to optimize my RevPAR by maximizing occupancy first, because the market is not achieving increases in occupancy year over year. So I don't know what the max rate's going to be. There's a lot of risk there, in my opinion. So I want to mitigate my risk on lower RevPAR by maximizing my occupancy, even if I leave a little bit of money on the table. Now, what I am going to do is, you'll see when I go to the Pro Tools, is I'm going to look at this in a little bit more portfolio level. So when I make some changes or look at some situations, I will consider only picking certain parts of my portfolio to do what I would call like a test, where I'm like going to adjust the rate rather than exposing my whole portfolio to that strategy. And then what I might do, depending on its success, is extrapolate that to other parts of the portfolio or other parts of the calendar. Okay, so let's jump into this really, really cool situation we've got here. And it's called, if we go to portfolio up here and go to the calendar, this is like the crux of the Pro Tool, and it's awesome. It'll probably have some pretty familiar concepts to you. It's essentially a tape chart that's going to show you your units and your rates. So let's get this to load up here. So you can see here, I've pulled this up. I've got some filters on the left, and each one of these is one of the units in the portfolio. The portfolio we have is all Nashville, but you can do different filters according to your markets, and it's going to show you all of your units. And then on the bottom here, you can scroll, and you've got the rates for all the days in the future. Really, really cool. Really awesome for a revenue management platform to be doing, because not only is it giving you rates, but you're also able to see this data. And then you'll see here, there's a couple things I want to point out. These little green guys, these are bookings. So you can see what's booked. And we've got a couple things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust some of what I'm showing here on my filters, just because I want to look at a couple different things. So I'm going to take off a few things just so I can see more dates. I'll take those off, and I'm going to put bedroom up because I have 2 different bedroom types in this portfolio, and I want to be able to sort by them so I can get just visually control what I'm looking at. And so what I'm going to look at here is, what kind of situation do I have? So at a glance, this weekend is coming up pretty quick. I mean, we're 2 days away, and I've got, I want to remove this San Francisco unit real quick. That was that Wheelhouse sample. Sorry, guys. I've got quite a bit of availability, actually, for 2 days out, which is kind of problematic. You can see that my rate here, we were looking at 1-bedroom rates in the market reports, and I'm sitting pretty close to the median. So you can already see that, like, if my strategy is to maybe position a little lower to try to capture higher revenue, I've probably missed the boat on these days. If I was looking at this, I probably wanted to make this decision last week. But you can see here, maybe I want to just capture some stuff. I know that the owners don't mind if they want as much money as I can get. So I can go ahead and I'm just going to drop this rate for this weekend pretty low. There's a few controls I have here. I've set a minimum rate, so I can drop the rate by a percentage and it'll just go to the minimum if I'm trying to go there. I can also set the rate to a specific rate. So here, let me backtrack. What I did is, the first thing I did is I selected all the units up here, because I'm just going to make a flat change. It's in the short term. I don't need to do a lot of like fine tuning because I've got 2 days to sell it. I just want to position a better rate. I selected these dates. I'm going to go and select the 5th through the 6th, and I'm just going to go ahead and I want to drop that 25% additional. There you go. Nice visualization. I can see it. You can see a couple other data points here that I have 2-night minimum stays. Maybe because I have so little time, I want to allow that to drop to a 1-night minimum stay. So I'm just going to click on a unit. It'll pull up this side panel, and I can go straight to the strategies. And I can adjust the minimum length of stay here rules. So you can see I have 2 nights on the weekend over here. Maybe for just this weekend, whoops, not that one. I'm going to do the date specific. Couple good options here. And I just want, maybe this 1 unit will allow 1 unit. The owner is okay with that. So 5th to the 6th, 1 night minimum stay.
Window, and you're kind of your first, it sounds like, when you're looking at your portfolio, you look at your upcoming, call it next 2 weeks or 3 weeks here, and you're really going to hone in and find and kind of do pricing adjustments and potentially minimum stay adjustments just to maximize, kind of capture those last minute bookings, so to speak. Is that kind of one of the first parts?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Now, one thing I think is really important, we're looking at this and we've made some assumptions. What I would look to do is, I really think, people get in the habit of really focusing on like the 0 to 14, 0 to 7 day window, that really short window. They'll look at their calendar and be like, oh man, I got to get people in. It's actually the place where you're going to make the least amount of impact on your portfolio. So I can look at this now and I'm thinking like, man, the system is really just not quite cutting to the level that I wanted. Maybe I had a winter, in winter it was fine because the rates were not that different from what we ended the day before to a month out. But now that the rates are getting much higher and people are booking them, we need to adjust that rate much closer in. And what I can do in this system is, if I observe this trend and I'm seeing like, man, I really need to reduce my rate more in the short term, you can actually automate that through the system. So the system starts with certain kinds of automation, but you can adjust them. And I would advise that you do that.
Yeah, and we did have a question from Cody in the audience saying this is great to be fine-tuned. But it looks like it will take a lot of time. There are a lot of automations. I think one assumption we made here is that you can, and John is going to automate certain aspects of the pricing engine, but he's also showing like once you had everything set up and running, you can come in and make adjustments around your risk strategy to potentially drive a lot more revenue as well. Is that a fair articulation, John, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm showing you guys kind of some things like in the short term. My goal as a revenue manager would be to have automated almost most of the stuff that I'm going to do within 14 days, because where I really want to focus is the 30 to 75 day window. That's where, in my experience, I've found that's where you really maximize your ADR, but still have an opportunity to sell out. If you're doing stuff within 30 days, man, it's what's the white knuckling everything. You really are taking a lot of risk. And if you can shift your perspective to spend your time on that further window, that's where you have the opportunity to try things and experiment with different strategies in terms of long-term stay, different price positions, a mix of rates that are being accepted in your portfolio.
Yeah. So what
I would do
is, it maybe fair to say, John, that we're kind of taking here a portfolio that we didn't really pre-set up very much. This is kind of you coming in to get your portfolio set up and automated in a particular fashion. And you will come in obviously and kind of make adjustments on a regular basis, but you're kind of setting out the strategy as you see, almost as though you're onboarding. Is that fair? Or am I?
That's kind of how we did it, but in a way that we can kind of look at this, because I do have some setup. I'm using a custom which goes out to 21 days. And what I might find is I looked at that data. We just came out of a low season with low rates, and I maybe had this set up. 20% was reasonable. But now I'm looking at the data and I'm saying, man, there's a big difference between what people are actualizing and what the rates are farther out. Maybe I want this to start cutting at 30 days now, and maybe I want it to cut deeper at all of these points so that I don't have to spend quite as much time dealing with that. And I think, a lot of people want to just set stuff and forget stuff, but when, and that's going to work if you're still building occupancy, if you're new product and you're learning and you're going to do better and better year over year, but those gains will dissipate the more mature your product is. And you have to come in and really fine tune it to get into the top 10 percentile of your market.
Automation initially, but if you want to keep pushing and really push revenue, you want to come in and take control and be looking at data. And some people might say, well, shouldn't an automated pricing engine take care of that? I would say philosophically, we partner well with individuals and professionals because I do think there's a really nice interplay where, without knowing the risk profile of a user or some of the strategies that you can see, hopefully here you're starting to control, Wheelhouse pricing will achieve the maximum revenue in most scenarios. But you do want to come in, like if you want to take more risk, you're welcome to do so. And John's showing you ways to balance that, maybe some of those risks and some of the market information, in a way that he's found very effective for driving rate. So I'll be quiet now. I'm talking too much, but keep going, Don.
Well, and just keep in mind, guys, when I was with Stay Alfred, we weren't using Wheelhouse. I've used it with clients since Stay Alfred has left the marketplace. But we used to do a lot of like, we had to develop all these rate plans ourselves, and because we did that work, I've been pretty confident with the way this is happening. But that's a huge level of automation already. I mean, we spent maybe 40% of our analysts' time developing these rate plans and making decisions about it, to get to the point where our daily work was really about making tweaks to optimize what we're doing. And so, if you look at an automation, it's going to be doing a lot of really good work, and you're going to be able to make good money. And it depends on how much you want to invest and what your priorities are for your company's growth. But when you start to decide, like, I want to get either my portfolio or these parts of my portfolio into the top 10 percentile, that's going to always be a mix of intervention from clever, creative people, and systems have to work together to achieve that. Okay, so going back into this, we'll look at a couple more scenarios. So I adjusted this just manually, real easy, real fast. I could do portfolio, I can just do individual levels. Judging by my assumptions, the indication here is that I actually would want to automate that, though. I want to go in, adjust my short-term discount so that the system is just pulling that down a little bit more, and maybe a little bit further out, so that I'm, especially in that 21-day window, I'm undercutting everyone else in the marketplace. So if we don't know how many people are shopping, but I want all of them. I know that you guys may have owners that set restrictions, and the nice thing about the platform is you don't have to, it's not all or nothing. You can do specific units, and we'll kind of go into that as well. But I want to look out a little further, because like I've said, a little further out is where I'm looking for opportunities. One thing I'm noticing here in my bookings is we saw that there's a pretty big difference between weekend and weekday, and that's bearing out in my bookings. I have almost no weekday stays. Okay, so I have a minimum rate set to $99. And what I may want to do is, I look at this, is decide, like, man, until I start seeing some bookings on weekdays, I actually want my weekdays to be always at the bottom and maybe a little lower than I normally would sell them, because I'm just not capturing anything. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll set this to 99 weekend, keep that, but maybe I'm going to go all the way to 79 on these days, and I'll just let that happen all the way through the calendar. You could also do it on specific dates or by time, but I have a hunch right now that I'm not making any weekday stays. I just need to be positioned to capture anything. And once I start capturing stuff, maybe I'll adjust that. Maybe I'll only offer half my portfolio at 79, the rest will stay at 99. I'll have to make that decision once I start getting bookings that will be data points for me to make assumptions off of. Great.
And this is a great example of a setting where a pricing engine shouldn't do this for you. You have to determine your minimum price. What are you willing to take with your operations, right? I think giving that information, Wheelhouse would never obviously go below it, but I think that's a really good point, or a really good example of how your strategy can become part of the solution. So
yeah. And how it should be flexible. I mean, a lot of us think like, hey, we just never go below $99. But if the owner doesn't care, and you're looking at a situation where maybe you could make more money doing that, then you should do that. But that doesn't have to be permanent either. I might decide in 2 months, as I see now I'm reaching 70% occupancy on weekdays, and and it looks like we're recovering. I might decide, hey, I'm going to keep this at $79 on the weekdays for another 30 days, and then I'm going to see if I can put it at 99 and hit the same occupancy levels. You know what I mean? And you can keep making those decisions as you go. One thing that I'm, would recommend is keep notes. If you're a revenue manager, just write, I have a slideshow, and I just like use the snipping tool and take pictures of stuff, and I just write notes. that I go back and look at when I'm making decisions. I think I've talked to Andrew about this. I think that they have it in their head maybe to integrate some notes features, which would be really cool. They'd be the first ones, but you know, notes are a good thing, and if you put them on notepads, you're probably losing them. So store them in a Google Doc somewhere. So looking at this, let's go out a little farther, because I really want to look out around the 30 days. You know, before we hit that, I'm kind of looking at this next weekend, and it's still pretty soft. I have a couple long-term stays, which are kind of bolstering occupancy, and maybe, like, let's assume that these bookings, the short bookings, a few of these bookings have come in pretty recently, so maybe I'm making sales, which would indicate there are some people purchasing. But I'm not confident looking at the coming weekend that this is going to sell out on this sales pace. So maybe what I want to do is I'm going to reduce the rate, but instead of doing it across the entire portfolio, maybe I'll just pick a couple units. Maybe it's a couple units that tend to be the last book. You know, this one has a booking score of 25. You might know in your portfolio the dogs. And I'm just going to grab a couple of those. Oh, let me get bedroom count on here real quick. I want these to be organized so that they're next to each other. Okay, so I've got a couple 1-bedrooms. All right, so let's just take a couple of these, and maybe I'll just pick a few. And I want this rate to undercut the market a little bit, even undercut the ending median that we've been seeing in the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to just take those units, and I'm going to drop them. 30 is probably a little bit much. Thing is, you'll build heuristics for this. If you're looking at your own portfolio consistently, you'll kind of know the ranges that you want things to be. So that's a little bit more. Oops, I did it on the wrong dates. Sorry, guys.
One question from, where is this tab again? How did you get here? This is a portfolio, or you kind of call it Pro Tools. Can you just scroll up to show people where you clicked on to get here?
Yeah, so if you go up to your portfolio and you click on the calendar, it's going to show this tool where you can see all your units together on the calendar view, and it's awesome. Keep in mind, if you're on your dashboard or even from here, you can click on an individual unit and look at its individual calendar, which can be really helpful, particularly if you have really unique units or you like to look at stuff that way. And the same options here are going to exist for adjusting things. I tend to think the portfolio view is one of the best, though, because it's all about what we said, turning patterns into data, and it's hard to extrapolate off of a single data point. So if you're only looking at one unit at a time, it's really hard to get an idea if something else is happening, because you might have a unit that's sitting, no bookings, and you look at it and it's just no bookings and you're making adjustments. But when you look at your portfolio, you might find that everything else is booked, and it all booked within the last 14 days, which indicates, you know, if you just looked at that one unit that's not booking, you might cut the rate. But if you look at all the units and you see that you're booking in other units, you might hold the rate or even increase it. Okay, what am I doing? Let's see if that is on there.
I think you wanted to set a discounted rate a little bit further out.
Right, so on this 12 to 13, what I did is I just picked few units. I dropped them below that median to kind of like undercut the market a little bit. And what I would probably do is check back, you know, at the end of the week and see if that worked. If those ones booked and the other ones didn't, it's a good indicator that they should all come down. If it's kind of a mix, you know, I kind of have to decide. And what I'm really looking for here is, especially if just like these booked before everything else, is can I extrapolate this out further? Does it make sense for me to undercut the market further out and always try to sell? You know, if I'm only selling 70% of my portfolio, can I sell the other 30% at a lower rate by just undercutting the market consistently? You know what I mean? And those are the kind of things I'm going to look for. So we'll keep going further out down this calendar. You can see here, I'm kind of skipping to the weekends because our weekday occupancy has been pretty low. You have to know on your assumptions what days are important to your overall RevPAR, your biggest contributors, because for you, if you're making week-long stays in a destination market, you need to consider the weekdays, and you might look at this a little different than, I need to sell out the weekends in Nashville. That all comes down to your assumptions and your strategy, but the fundamentals of how you approach it are probably going to be pretty similar. You know what I mean? Okay, so I've got this next weekend here. This one, interestingly, is more booked than the previous one, which is a pretty good indicator. And so an important thing to understand when you're looking at this, so you can see my mouse right here. I got a little bit more bookings. There's still some short bookings and some long-term bookings. Rates are a little bit lower than that 200 price point, but still looking pretty good. And I think what makes me think about this is we're further out, we're a little bit more booked. It's going to come down to when those bookings came in. If I am looking at my reservations and all of these bookings came in recently, I might want to hold that rate or increase the rate, right? But if all these bookings came in like 2 months ago and this has just been sitting at this rate or in that rate range and not booking, then even though it's more occupied, I probably want to drop that rate because I need to prime the engine. I need to be getting sales data points to indicate to me where the consumers are buying. So let's pretend that, none of these bookings have come in the last 2 weeks. I might go ahead and take some of these units and I might drop them. Maybe not as much because the rate's already a little lower. I have some occupancy on the books, so I've already have less risk than the closer week with that has less occupancy. So maybe I'll just go ahead and take this and I'm just going to put on 15%. And maybe, because I got a bunch of 2 bedrooms down here, maybe I'll take one and drop it even further just because I want to make sure that those book. And the closer in we're on with this 2 bedroom, the more volatile the rate's going to be. So maybe this one will come to 35. So the nice thing about the platform is you can differentiate how you want to offer your portfolio in the marketplace, right? So let's keep going. I've noticed here that I really don't have a lot of weekday stays still. Like there's just nothing going on weekdays. And when I think of that, if we're not getting a lot of transient weekday, and especially if lowering the rate isn't really working, we're always got vacancy, then something that might work for us is to adjust the long-term stays. Is maybe we can offer a long-term stay strategy that will bolster, provide what we called at Stay Offered a base of business for us to build on all the time. Because if you have, 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever you're comfortable with, part of your portfolio, basically fully booked, then you're only price managing for a much smaller portfolio and you're willing to take a little bit more risk on ADR, particularly on like weekends, which may be selling out. So as I look at this, I'm basically, I'm getting like 0% occupancy on weekdays. So I might be willing to take up to 50% of my portfolio on long-term stay. And so I'll look through the units that I think would be good to offer that on. I probably don't want to offer my top properties in that regard because they're going to make the most on transient anyway. So maybe I'll look at some of the weakest properties I got. I can use the score you might already know in your portfolio. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set a long-term stay strategy for these guys through long-term stay discounting. So I went into the unit. I'm not showing you this because we're focusing on the Calendar Pro tool, but all of these strategies can be bulk updated, which is really helpful using this settings calendar. So you can actually, select them and we can make these settings. But I'm going in just because if you're not as familiar, you can see where they live on the individual unit. And so I'm going to go to strategy. I'm going to go to long-term discount. I got at 1520. I've got 0% occupancy for 2/3 of the month if I'm not booking weekdays. Maybe this can go all the way to 25 and 40. Right? And maybe I'll put that on half of my portfolio because those are the half that I'm willing to sell because my occupancy is so low. Now, keep in mind, like we said, strategies and assumptions aren't static. Depending on how I'm booking, I might want to change that. We get 30 days down the line, it's April, we're recovered. Maybe I don't want to give up that much anymore. We're getting transient stays on weekdays. Maybe I'll pull that down. Additionally, you can think about how the rate interacts. You know, I may reduce the rate on some units, but I want to make sure I don't reduce the rate through rate adjustments here on those units where I've put in a different length of stay strategy, because we're really just trying to book those long-term. By offering a long-term discount, we don't need to offer an additional short-term discount on top of that. Maybe you combine them. You know, that's the importance of taking notes and then kind of watching those things, but you're making the decision about how much of your portfolio you want to offer at any given price point, and if that's going to contribute to your ending revenue. So we've done a couple things here. We cut down the short term and made some adjustments to our automation so that it automatically does that a little more. We've looked a little further out and split up our offering on the portfolio. We've put a couple to undercut because we think that people are going to, you know, we're maybe holding rates a little too long. Now, if we look a little further out, we still have that situation where we have a hunch that maybe in the 30 to 60 day window, we're a little overpriced. So what I could do there is I'm just going to scan and see where I've got availability. You can see they've got a couple weekends that are got some bookings on them. And maybe I'll pick a couple of units here. This one, I'll pick a 2-bedroom, maybe two bedrooms. And I'm just going to take this and 30 days out, maybe all the way to 60 days. I'm just going to drop this rate a little bit. I'm just going to position this unit a little bit lower. And I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to see what books over time.
It's a little bit of a demo portfolio set up around COVID, and we should definitely do a deep dive into like, what if your portfolio is crushing it? How do you read those signals 30, 60, 90, 120 days in the future and adjust around that? So
sure. I've actually got one example. I know we're getting kind of short on time. We've been talking a lot here, but we do have a couple date ranges out here that have some bookings, like particularly, let's see, that's May. This one's pretty good. I mean, this is a full month out. We've got 2 short bookings, and it really comes down to what we were discussing before, which is when did those bookings come in? If those bookings came in the last like couple days, especially, I'm probably just going to go ahead and throw a rate increase across some units or maybe across the whole portfolio, right? You have to make the decision, you know, in terms of like how far out and how much of your portfolio is booked, but you can just go ahead and throw a rate increase on this and see if that booking momentum continues, you know, and if it continues, you can just keep adding to it. You know what I mean? You can keep increasing, but what you want to look out for is when the bookings stop. When the bookings stop, pull all that back. Keep in mind too, Wheelhouse is going to be adjusting based on overall market compression. So as what I say compression, that basically means bookings. As if the market is spiking in terms of bookings, the platform is going to automatically adjust your pricing, and that's pretty effective. But you have to keep in mind, as people are asking, like, well, if the system's going to do it, why do I need to do it? It's because your portfolio, probably guaranteed, is going to be booking differently than the market. You know that there's times where you look at the market and you're like, man, it looks like everyone's booked out. Why am I not booked out? It's like, well, the market may be telling you need to raise your rates, but if your portfolio is not booked, you probably need to lower them. And the opposite is also true. Maybe you had some groups, maybe you have just a really great brand or a really successful marketing campaign, and you're making a bunch of bookings for 30, 60 days out, and the market's not really moving yet. You should not wait to capitalize on that. You know, you don't need to let the market catch up to you for you to capitalize on that success, right? So if you see those trends in your portfolio, that's what you're really dealing with. The system is going to automate what's going on in the market. You have to compare that to what's going on in your portfolio. Cool. Well, I think
you want to give us a summary, John? Tell us a little bit about what you did today. What's the short version of what you did today?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that's really, you know, we'll go back to these principles. because it really comes down to this, which is check your assumptions. First, make assumptions. Have a general idea of what you're trying to achieve in the marketplace, whether that's occupancy, ADR, how you think, hey, maybe those statements could be high season rates are around 300 and low season are around, 150. Make those assumptions, because now you can challenge them. Now you can go to the data and say, hey, I think the rates are supposed to be 300. I looked at this data and the market says it's like 199 right now. So now you have an indication of what you could do when you adjust your portfolio. Okay, so make assumptions and then double check them constantly. Great. Next one, practice turns data into patterns. The more you look at this, the more you'll be able to just glance at a graph and not have to look at every day and scroll over it. You'll just be like, okay, I understand this shape and it matches or invalidates what I'm assuming. So I either need to do a deeper dive or I already know what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? But the more you look at this stuff and the more you look at your portfolio and your bookings, the you'll be able to just make those snap connections.
And give us a sense, John, how long does that take someone? Like, how long should we expect to have to kind of use this tool before data turns into patterns?
It really depends on the person. Some people are probably going to be a little better at it initially. I think if you spend the time to think about and write down or identify what you think the market should be like, it's going to make it easier, because it's always easier to compare something than to invent something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because if you're like, okay, well, I think the market should be $300 on weekends, and you pull up a graph and none of those points are at $300, you already know something. So the last piece here on these principles is build around your mix of risk and reward. We talked a lot about this. It ties into your assumptions, but when you're making decisions to either, test if you can hold a higher rate than the market, or if you think you can get more occupancy because you're going to undercut the market, you're the one who's deciding how much of your portfolio you're putting in that position of testing. And you should consider every decision you're making on rates as a test. There's a scientific method to it. If I do this, then maybe this will happen. And then when you do it, the data will tell you if you're right. So you have to determine if, you're willing to undersell your entire portfolio, or you just want to put 10% out to see if there's something there, understanding that you're losing time, the smaller portion of your portfolio you're putting out there. It's always a balance. You get to make those decisions though. And if you know what your strategy is, they should relate in a way that you're able to explain and you're comfortable with.
I like that trade-off between time and money. It's good. It's great.
Yeah.
John, I'll take this enough. Thank you so much, dude. This is fantastic. Obviously a lot of great comments came up. Thank you for a masterclass on how to do revenue management. I see a few people asking for another session. So excellent. We want to say thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this was helpful or fun. What you saw today was the free Wheelhouse market report tied to either managing pricing on an individual level or on a portfolio level. If you have any questions, our team is here to help. You can email us at hello@usewheelhouse.com. If you visit our site, we have 24/7 chat. If you want to speak to John, how can they reach you directly if they had questions about you?
Sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a message. It's just John DeRelay. You can also email me at john.j.derelay@gmail.com. I'm a pretty open book. Love to chat. Been in the industry for a long time, and I just like to help people. So if you want to reach out and talk to me about either professional engagement or just have some questions, feel free to.
Excellent. And for those who joined, we will be sharing a recording of today. Also, we'll be sharing out a discount code. So for anyone who watched, wants to sign up, learn something fun today, we will be giving you a discount code. We'll be sharing that as well as a survey, because John and I both came into today saying our only goal really is to see how much we can share with the industry and teach others. And therefore, we need feedback about what could we have slowed down on, what could we have done better. I'm sure you all love John, but like anything we can hear to do better for you all would be meaningful. So please share your critiques, share what you liked, share what you didn't understand quite yet. And we'll be sure to do more of these with more material soon. So thank you so much. And otherwise, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, all. Excellent. Be well. Thank you so much, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, all, we'll shut down this and hope to hear from you or see you all soon.